Thank you everyone so much for joining our Ask the Experts panel on SauceCon, EMEA, and rest of world. My name is Sarah Petrie. I'm a senior solution engineer at Sauce Labs. So I'm actually a member of the panel, but I'm also going to be moderating today's session. To get us started, we're going to go around. I'm going to allow our expert panel to introduce themselves. So go ahead.
I should start.
Yep.
I'm Marcus Merrell. I'm the Senior Director of Field Services for Sauce Labs. So I run the team of experts who help people with adoption of the Sauce Labs platform and Selenium and basically everything that implies, which means that we're in this to try to help people build successful automation programs, period. Things peripheral to the Selenium discussion, or if we think you're using it too much, we'll tell you. So that's what my team is all here for. And I'm pleased to introduce you. I'll just pass it off to Wim arbitrarily.
Yeah, my name is Wim Selles, Solutions Architect at Sauce Labs. Working there now for almost 2 years and trying to help customers get the most value out of Sauce Labs, help them with automation struggles they might have, and put them on the right path. Diego.
Thank you, Wim. I am Diego Molina. I have been in Sauce Labs for a bit longer than 1 year. I mostly work in Selenium WebDriver related topics. I am very active in the Selenium community, a Selenium committer, and I'm now part of the new open source team in Sauce Labs. And my main goal is to actually be the bridge between all the developments in WebDriver and that let them happen inside our company so our customers are happy and using the latest and greatest features of WebDriver. Christian. We left Jane last. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Diego. My name is Christian. I'm a senior software engineer at Sauce Labs, working with Diego in the open source program office, where I'm representing Sauce at the W3C. I'm maintaining the WebDriver project, and very recently started a new project at Sauce that I will talk later with Matt Ruske in a later session about Docker containerization. So feel free to join that. And yeah, pass it on to Jane.
Yeah, I'm Jane MacNeil. I'm the Director of Engagements here at Sauce, and I help our customers develop their programs to realize the value of automation. And Sarah.
All right, excellent. Thank you, panel. So you guys have obviously noticed by now that we have a lot of expertise in terms of open source right now. So let's get those questions starting to come in. We've already got a couple to get us started, but please don't be shy. There should be a box in which you can submit your questions. So the first one we're going to start with, Marcus, I think this is going to be a great one for you. Question is, there has been a lot of activity in the industry around Selenium 4 and W3C protocol. I wonder if you could start us off by talking about what this means for our customers and what it will take for them to be up to date.
Sure, I can talk a little bit. We actually might have more expertise with Diego, but in the broadest sense, the real answer is that there's not much difference in the day-to-day activity of Selenium between 3 and 4. What is the difference is that what Selenium 4 will give you is the ability to continue to use Selenium with browsers as these things evolve. Basically, there's a monumental shift underneath the waves, if you would put it that way, in how Selenium operates and how Selenium communicates with the web browsers. But the interface that you're using should remain mostly the same. What you have to do is change a couple of things about how you instantiate the driver, and other than that, it should be roughly the same. It should be fairly easy to accomplish the transition. But what you get in return is the latest support from the newer versions of the browsers. As the browser vendors continue to evolve, they'll be able to keep up with it a lot better. Diego, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, perhaps this is not so visible for the end user, but one of the main objectives is to, as Simon Stewart says, like to have stable user-facing APIs. So when we have a standardized way of controlling browsers, maybe some of you had issues in the past where a test was working in Firefox and not in Chrome, and this was due to the old use of the JSON wire protocol that behaved differently in some specific areas of the browser. And when things are standardized, this will benefit your tests because you will have a seamless behavior across different browsers. And in the end, by upgrading to Selenium 4 when it's released and also using the W3C standard, in short, you will be able to use the latest and greatest features, and you will be able to use things like CDP and things like that. So that's the main goal of having the latest version being used. Kristen is also part of the W3C group. I don't know if you want to add something, but that's it for me. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, all I can add from the WCC side is that we are currently working in parallel to make the protocol, the WebDriver protocol, a BiDi standard, so that it's not only doing requests and responses, but also connects to the driver using sockets, so that you can not only send commands, you can also receive events that could be, for instance, network events or DOM events, which will make the protocol much richer and much more powerful as it is right now. And we are working with all browser vendors together to find a common standard that everyone is happy with, and everyone can implement in the browser, which makes it then a truly cross-browser protocol as it is already right now.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for all that feedback, panel. This is actually probably a very natural follow-up to that. So Christian, you mentioned WebDriver, and WebDriver IO is a hot topic. We had a question come in. It's very broad, and we'll really open this up for you to comment as you will. But there's questions about WebDriver IO. We've got everything from, is WebDriver IO a good framework to use, to what is the difference between Selenium and WebDriver IO? So if you'd like to give a little bit of a background on WebDriver IO, a little bit of context, and then some of your insights, we'd appreciate that.
Sure. Actually, when I started working on WebDriver when I was in university, and it actually got me to work at Sauce in the end, because I got to meet some people at Sauce, and they liked the stuff that I was doing with it, so they invited me on. And since then, I've contributed to it, and it's one of the oldest Selenium-based WebDriver frameworks that is out there. And the real difference is really that it is more a framework where Selenium is like really title says it's already do what I say, I think, or do what I mean. I'm not sure, one of them. WebDriver is more like it takes some work out of you. Like it provides a framework with embedded reporters, embedded services that lets you integrate to Sauce Labs, Apply Tools, or other companies, and takes away a lot of work that you would usually need to do if you build your own framework and setup. So I think a lot of people find it easier to work with WebDriver because they don't need to put everything together by themselves.
Yeah, I think a good way, one way to think about it is that Selenium WebDriver is intended to be a robotic browser control mechanism. If you just think about all the implications of that, it's a robotic browser control mechanism. It's not a test tool. It does exactly what you say to do. If you say click on a button, it's going to go click on that button. If that button isn't there right at that millisecond, it's going to fail. WebDriver IO builds in some ergonomics, the way I'd put it, to say if you click on the button, it's going to be reasonable and do what you as a human would do, which is you'd use your eyes to say, all right, I think that's there. All right, we're going to give it a second. Okay, it's there, now click it. It's built with testing ergonomics in mind.
Yeah.
And something I'd like to add there is maybe we are not being clear enough in the Selenium project in this type of message. And Selenium is meant to be, Selenium WebDriver is meant to be a low-level library that you can use to automate a browser. And you need to put things on top like an assertion library and so on, many other things. This means that if we make an analogy in the Java world or in the JavaScript world, if you want to build a website, you wouldn't use JavaScript plain. You would use like a framework that is helping you to build a website, like, I don't know, React or Vue. You wouldn't start from scratch. Think in the same way in automation. You need to start with a framework that is helping you focus only on testing, not actually build the framework. So this is how I like to put it.
I think that's some really good insight. If anyone does have any additional questions about Selenium, feel free to put those into the box so that we can answer those for you. Additionally, after the session, there will be a Slack channel created for any additional questions that come up. So we had another question come in from the audience. So there's a team out there of manual testers using Sauce Labs for web manual testing. And the question is is it possible to somehow manually change host entries without writing an automated script with pre-run as described in our Sauce Labs documentation? So I'm wondering maybe if Diego or Christian would like to take a crack at that one.
I can try to answer. I'm still like transitioning from the live testing team to the open source team. And it's a very valid use case, but to be honest, we haven't really had the insights from customers where we can make this a relevant priority. Right now, we're focusing on like changing the usability of the product. But if there is an urgent need, like reach out to your sales contact, and we can make it as a priority if needed in some case. But I just want to say that it's a valid use case that maybe you need to do that. I believe that you can also do some tricks with Sauce Connect, like overriding some host entries. I'm not sure if you can do that, but maybe Wim knows more about that part, or Marcus or Jane. Or
it sounds like a thing that it sounds reasonable to me that you could do that, but I just don't know the answer for sure.
All right, thanks everyone. Let's see. So we did have another one come in. Looks like this one's going to be good for a good one for Jane. So Jane, it's clear that running a program is a lot more than just having a strong test strategy. So I was wondering if you could talk about what you see as critical steps to ensuring a successful outcome and increased digital confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time working and building programs outside of even just test automation. And I'd say that there's a lot of different indicators that can point to a successful program. But for me, the crux of it, and we've got a lot of great customer talks here at SauceCon online that are focused on the nature of collaboration and having people that feel like they're at the peer level working with quality and with developers that have really good automation programs. And I think that says a lot about almost like this open source movement, right? Is where people are drawing off of other people's expertise and they're leveraging things that have existed before versus trying to create things from scratch. Exactly to Christian's point, is like that works with enterprises as well. Is if you are collaborating with your peers and you're doing that successfully and you're very mission focused, if you know what you're trying to get across and trying to achieve and you've got trust and collaboration, you'll be successful. But I love to answer like more specific questions, but I always want to know, what our customers are dealing with first and foremost before we provide, advice on that.
One of the shifts we're making this year is from being a group that sort of advises but doesn't get hands-on. We're trying to start to offer actual professional services for people, which could be, a Sauce resource, could be partner-led, but it's something where we actually are starting to put hands on keyboard for customers who need a real boost, not just vague advice.
Yeah,
that's some great insight. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Marcus. All right, so we had an actual, this is a really interesting question that's come in for the panel in general. Given that we have so many individuals who are working towards open source projects, but everyone on this panel obviously is also a Sauce Labs employee, the question is maybe why we think it's important to work for a vendor that ties itself to open source. So I'd love actually if each member of the panel would mind providing some insights onto that.
Who do you want to start with?
Let's start with Wim.
Wow. Well, why I think a vendor ties itself to open source, I think Sauce Labs is built on top of open source. We're basically, without open source, there was no Sauce Labs. And I think it's very important if you use it also for some commercial ends, that you also contribute back to the open source that you're using, making it better, helping customers benefit also from open source. So yeah, that's what I really like about Sauce Labs. It also gives me the opportunity to also contribute to open source. So it's not only the company itself, but it also gives the people within Sauce Labs the opportunity to help with open source projects.
Beautiful. I can actually give my answer too. I forgot sometimes that I'm actually a member of the panel. But so as a solution engineer, I've worked for several different companies in the industry, and I've worked for companies that took more of the vendor lock approach, where the technology forced you, the tool itself forced how you tested and how you automated, and it really backed you into corner. And after serving in those companies, coming to a place where we're such believers in the best practices, but there's not one way to do everything. And it makes a lot of sense that different frameworks are going to fit different use cases and different organizations, and that automation can look a little bit different for everybody. So being now at a place where we embrace multiple different approaches while still being proponents for best practices I love having the conversation so much more than I have at previous companies that I've worked at.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's a perspective I haven't heard much before. Since I normally hang out with people like Diego, it's great to hear that from a business perspective. That perspective.
Yeah. I think that's why Sarah and I are super excited about like the sauce bindings, which use many different types of technology, but make it a lot easier for people to get up and running and started. So that's a huge advantage, because we do see customers that are choosing different paths that make sense for their business, or even from a resourcing perspective, what they have available, what they can reasonably hire into those roles with those backgrounds. So yeah. But I mean, Marcus or Wim can maybe talk a little bit about sauce bindings. I think that'd be something interesting for our audience.
Maybe I can. I'm trying to in my mind, I'm trying to whittle my answer down because it could take 20 minutes, but I'll try to lead to it. But essentially, what I'm amazed at is the seismic shift in the attitude towards open source over the last 10 years that I've been involved with open source. 10 years ago, when you would go into a company, you're a QA person, you're an SDET, and you walk in and you tell your boss you want to adopt this open source framework, and they would say, we don't trust that. That's just a bunch of yokels on the internet in their pajamas. What are they doing? Putting their thing. There's no profit motive. They're not motivated to do these things well or high quality or consistently, and they're going to be gone when you need them and stuff like that. And I remember it was a kind of a defining moment, probably 2012. I was in a group like that, kind of everyone against me, and then one VP turned to the other and said, you know what, have you ever tried getting support from Oracle or Microsoft? And it was a crystallizing moment. So over the last 8 years, we've seen this seismic shift where companies are now looking at open source as a way to set themselves up for success, the way they used to look at tying themselves to a vendor. And that's what we're doing, as we're shifting. So we're trying to get to the point here where it makes our job harder because you now have the universe open to you. Your toolkit is infinite. And what we're trying to do is say, well, this isn't our prescriptive solution that we need to hand you. What this is this is a beginning. So we have a thing called sauce bindings, which is an attempt at kind of a kickstart of a framework to allow you to say, if you type a couple lines of code, you now have a project which gives you a template and gives you the ability to say, we're going to just give you kind of a launch into this, and then you have some example page objects, you have some example test cases, you have some example configurations, and then your metadata is all being sent to Sauce Labs, and all of it's open source and all of it's contributable from anyone. So that's where we're trying to reach here, is make it to where we're the vendor who is passionately devoted to open source, but we also are helping you figure out the right path to get through it because it's complicated.
Yeah. To add to Marcus' point, I think the best part about our role at Sauce is that we can work with our customers together and with everyone in the open source industry to make just the whole testing experience better, instead of building our own proprietary solution that maybe disappears if something happens with Sauce. So every big customer who's relying on Sauce relies on open source, and on open standards, which will never be away. It goes far beyond a certain single organization.
Right, and the way I see it, it's also when an open source project or movement or standard is critical for the business strategy, let's stop thinking about automation or testing, but let's think about the case of Kubernetes. Like Google is behind it because it's really important for them as their strategy, and they are the #1 vendor for this. So that's where a company thinks that this is where my future is, this is where most of my users are, and that's why I support WebDriver 100% here in Sauce Labs, because that's where we believe and when we want to support our users. That's a basic equation how things could work.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, so much. All right, we've had another one come in. So thank you to whoever attended our session this morning. So in this morning's What's Next for Sauce Labs, our Chief Product Officer mentioned the new Sauce Labs Test Runner Toolkit. Christian, can you describe what that is or tell us a little bit more about that? I think you might be involved in it.
Yeah, I've been a bit involved in it, and it is a new way how we want to allow customers to run any arbitrary framework they have on our cloud and use our reporting and analytics capabilities to understand where the errors are in the test and find out where they can improve them. So the way it works is that we will execute tests in a Docker container that either runs on your CI or on our platform at some point. And we've shipped with pre-configured test runner frameworks, being a Puppeteer with Jest, being it the new Playwright tool from Microsoft, or another tool that could be, that your team is currently using that is not based in WebDriver. And there's a lot of people out there that have chosen to use a tool that is not using that technology, and that is fine. And we understand that these people want to have access to our analytics and source capabilities as well. And with the new Test Runner Toolkit, we want to provide that for everyone.
I am not muted anymore. Excellent. Okay, thank you, Christian, so much for that answer. We've got a great one. So Diego, I got one for you. So Selenium also runs 11 test cases in parallel using AWS Cloud. Can you explain advantages of using Sauce Labs over Selenium?
Well, it's not a secret that as the technology advances and Docker and all the new things in the cloud are present, it's not that hard anymore to build your own grid, right? And that's what I did a couple of years ago with a friend in my previous company, where we actually built this framework. And what people don't see here, what the advantage is that, of course, we were paid to work on this. We worked barely like around 2 years only on this. And just think if your company can pay you 2 years only to work on that. So the advantage of using something like Sauce Labs in this case is that there is a group of experts dedicated only to work on that and having this only available for you. And even if you use Selenium, which is like my baby and I love it with all my heart, like you still need a lot of hardware to run it properly, and you need expertise to deploy it and so on. So it's basically, you can decide on your own where you want to invest your time and what you want to learn. It's all fine by me that you spend time learning how to deploy things in AWS and learning how to measure CPU and RAM and so on and do it on your own. Or maybe you can just focus on writing good test cases and giving value to the business. So it's basically what the strategy and what goal do you have as a user and as an automation engineer and as a person who's contributing to your team. Personally, I feel that I have a lot of learnings, but I prefer to focus now on more things that are perhaps giving more value to my colleagues, and to myself as well.
All right, that's some really good feedback. Marcus, was there something you wanted to add on this subject, or was I think we had another question come in? Was that where you wanted to add on?
I'll just take 10 seconds and basically say that I've built 3 different AWS auto-scaling Selenium grids, 2 of which are open source. And I also, with Diego, teach a class on how to set up Selenium Grid at the Selenium conference twice a year. We are believers in the Selenium Grid as a way to stand up your business and then stop dealing with having to update Chrome every other week and use somebody else's infrastructure. It's better to rent it than to put all that effort into it. So I was a customer for 8 years before I came here, and it was always easier to just use Sauce.
Good thoughts, good thoughts. All right, so we have a mobile question coming in for Wim. So for mobile device automation, is there any way to take iOS devices offline without needing to replicate the manual steps?
The answer is quite simple. Currently not. There's no endpoint like you would have with Android to disable Wi-Fi. So no, for iOS currently not.
All right. Okay, and the next one, so also about mobile. While using live testing, is there a way to configure proxy network for mobile devices to be able to test the traffic and the API calls on app makes, excuse me?
Depends on how you see it. We just gave a presentation a few minutes ago about virtual USB. And so if it goes live, please check also that presentation about virtual USB, because we currently have an offering where you can monitor everything what's happening on the device, on the private devices by using virtual USB. So I think if you would look at that presentation also, that would also answer that question. But
the ability to turn on and off HAR file recording and download it easily from any device in the real device cloud, that's a feature request that that my group is actually creating for the product that we're hoping will make it in fairly soon.
Excellent. All right, so we've got just a couple minutes left. We had a question come in about Sauce features, and so someone has asked, they've seen that Sauce is starting to provide more insights and more analytics within the product itself. So I'm wondering, Jane, if you'd like to start off answering that one, if anyone else would like to provide some feedback on that, please do.
I actually really love Diego's answer about the Selenium piece, where he's like, yeah, you could spend 2 years building something like this if you're really smart and that's what you're focused on. But I think most of our customers have kind of come to that realization. Anybody that's using Sauce has already said, no, I don't want the pain and the handling this hassle. This is something that we can rent and we can use. But the biggest thing and the point of conversation that I have with all of my customers is about Sauce Insights, about all the analytics and all of the data and things that we've produced. And particularly this started with the CTB, being able to gather and anonymize all of that data and use our experts to determine, what are really good indicators, I think has been probably like the best source of conversation that I've had with people. Because it's not just about like, how many tests do you have? How many numbers are you running? You have to be somewhat careful about those types of metrics. But yeah, I think that this is something that Marcus and Wim and I are quite clearly pretty aligned on as like the future of Sauce, the thing that we think is most valuable for our customers. So. Yeah,
if you think about all of the traffic flowing into, out of, back into, back out of our ecosystem, there's a lot that we are watching happen in your application. And there's a lot of insight we could be telling you around this library might be out of date, this JavaScript library, or this API call you're making is insecure, or this form field is formatted in such a way that it might allow for SQL injections. Just imagine we're just passively watching and we could give you insights into all of that. That's kind of what came to be. That was the lighthouse that brought me to this company, was the oceans of data that we're sitting on. So.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there's going to be more to come down the road on that subject. Well, we're right there at the top of our time. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you have any additional questions, again, so not only is there the answers bar in the Slack workspace, we also did create a specific channel as a follow-up to this. It's called Ask the Experts. Feel free to join. Our experts panel are all present in there and drop any additional questions you have. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you again for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.